Thank you everyone for coming. My name is Anand, and we'll get into the details very, very shortly. Today, I have three key objectives. One, I understand I'm standing between us and a glorious lunch outside. So first, I'll try and ensure that we are out there on time. Second, after 2 full days of conference and conference talks, it's quite possible that the energy levels have started to dip. So there are some notes here. So I'll try and ensure that we have our energy levels high. And third, my objective will be that I share my experiences and observations on the roles engineers play in the outcomes of digital transformation initiatives. So once again, thank you for joining us. You had a variety of different options, but just you made time to come here. I'm really happy about that. So why don't we start with just fixing the energy levels, right? Could I just request all of us to just stand up, please? Oh, no. All right. The one thing I've noticed in this space is it's usually been a little silent. So we're going to make some noise. And because we are all making noise as a group, it's probably the lesser of the evil. It's not just one person talking. So I'm thinking 2 claps and a loud yell, yay. All right? All right, you up for it? All right? So after me, so it's like 2 claps and yay. Let all the other rooms also get to hear, all right? So on 3, 1, 2, 3. Yay! All right, please have a seat. Thank you. Cool. And we can do this as many times as we want. Like, why not? All right. Cool. So let's get started. I think all of us here have been part of several transformation initiatives. Organizations undergo these transformation initiatives for a variety of different reasons. We have been part of these transformation initiatives of various shapes, sizes, and even stages, right? Organizations choose to undergo these transformation initiatives for a variety of different reasons. Some say they want to improve their customer experience. Some say they want to increase the amount of self-service options they want to become. They want to fight the competition. We have a variety of different reasons why we want manage cost. You name it. We have different reasons to choose one or more to form the basis of a transformation strategy. However, if you look around, the statistics are really jarring. I just pulled up one study from McKinsey, but I'm sure a large number of consultancies probably agree with that only a small handful of transformation initiatives actually succeed. Now, according to this McKinsey study, it said only 16% of the initiatives actually meet their intended outcomes. Well, if you are being a little more generous, if you're being a little more benevolent, let's say, we could add 7% more to it. It still brings the pass marks to around 23 to 25%. Simply put, 3 out of 4 initiatives simply fail to meet their intended outcomes. Now, an interesting question is, why does this happen? If you ask an engineer and an engineering team, this is an engineering conference, a developer conference. If you ask an engineer or an engineering team, we'll probably point out to the infamous triangle of scope, time, and cost. We might end up saying there was too much of scope, there was too little time, or just not enough money. But you hold them, or let's say if you prod them a little deeper, we, engineers, we might come back and start pointing fingers at, hey, the strategy was wrong right from the very start. You don't even know how wrong it was. We just went ahead with it. Or the operating environment kept on changing. Or, did I tell you about my leadership? Did I tell you about how they behaved and how they set this whole thing up? We might invent a variety of different reasons. While I think all of these have a role to play, all of these are indeed valid factors, I wonder if we as engineers or engineering teams have paused long enough to look at our role in how we shape the outcome of the transformation programs. So hi, my name is Anand. And I've been in this industry for about 25 years. First, starting as an engineer and then as an engineering leader, I've primarily worked in 3 key areas: retail, travel and hospitality, and to some extent in the global logistics industry space. And these days, I work at Kingfisher as an engineering director responsible for transformation initiatives there. Now, Specifically, for those of you who are not aware of Kingfisher, and specifically our South Asian friends, any Indians out here? All right, hello, I'm also an Indian. So especially for our Indian friends out here, Kingfisher is a FTSE 100 company, which is in the home improvement industry. We help customers like us, the DIYers, and we also help our pro customers, the traders, help improve people's life by helping us build better homes. So you might be amazed or not surprised. We serve our customers here in the UK through our brands like B&Q and Screwfix. Anyone have been to B&Q or Screwfix here? Right, all right, those are Kingfisher brands. So when you buy something from B&Q or Screwfix, look around, and you might find our corporate address there. That's B&Q and Screwfix. So B&Q and Screwfix are predominantly in mainland, in UK. And we serve some of our European colleagues, European customers through Castorama and Brico Dépôt. Anyone from France here? France, Romania? All right, okay, maybe Castorama sounds familiar. So we serve our Poland. Castorama is also in Poland. So we serve our customers through these brands. But back to the topic. See, in any given situation, I believe we are surrounded by three spheres. Is the circle of things we control, is the circle of things we can influence, and the third is the circle of things which are of concern. Each of these three circles are overlapping, no doubt about it. And each of these circles, one is bigger than the other, absolutely. But today, for a change, we are going to take a very self-critical view. We are only going to focus on things that we control. We are going to forget for some time about the things we can influence or things which can be of any concern. What I'm going to share here are some deep, personal, first-hand lived experiences. All of this is real. I mean, if you put a gun to my head, I might have to reveal the names. But for the purposes of this talk, I have anonymized names and references to protect not only the innocent, but also the guilty, right? So, so we'll protect those innocents so that you can enjoy the experience without getting too bogged into the details, like who did that? Like why did it happen? Perhaps you need a gun for that, right? I don't know. So as we go through the talk, we will talk about all the 5 dysfunctions. And I'm hoping that as we go through these 5 dysfunctions, you might be able to spot a silver thread, a thread which runs through all these 5 of these dysfunctions, because therein lies the answer to start overcoming some of these challenges. With me so far? All right, another energizer? Or you're good? All right. All right, cool. So the first place where I wanted to start was examining a deep innate belief in our ability to fix issues simply by rewriting software. Why rewrite? Well, we are starting to talk about transformation. Why are we talking about rewrites? Well, I believe that most of the transformation initiatives, at least I have been part of, were essentially a rewrite of some kind. So I think that's why I wanted to start there. It's by examining our belief in our ability to solve issues by rewriting software. Again, going back to the reasons slide, we have been, I'm sure many of us here have been part of rewrite initiatives, are probably still in a rewrite initiative. I am in one of them right now. And we choose a variety of different reasons on why a software should be rewritten. Whether it is to retire older technologies, welcome new technologies, manage crippling debt, manage cost, improve the functional and non-functional requirements, you name it, we have a variety of different reasons to go for a rewrite. Sometimes we also have trivial reasons to go for a rewrite. A maturity assessment said so. Some external consultancy comes in, throws in puts in 6 weeks worth of work and says, the application needs to be rewritten. So sometimes we have those frivolous reasons as well as to why we go ahead with a rewrite. But I wonder if we have paused long enough to consider an inherent paradox in this approach. Why? Well, see, at the beginning of a rewrite initiative, whether it's an engineer, an engineering team, an architecture team, spends an enormous amount of time thinking about variety of different criteria. We think about things like the domain boundaries, the data models, how these components are going to talk about, documentation standards, implementation standards. We spend so much amount of time thinking about all these factors simply because we want the application to be bulletproof and future-proof for all the business needs. Now, while we are doing that, I'm pretty sure the engineers and the engineering teams who came before us have also taken the very same considerations. They've also always thought about the same things. How do I scale this up? How do I make it more robust? How do I serve all the business needs? But yet, when the time comes to choose, should we evolve the system or should we rewrite the system, we typically choose the rewrite path, thinking it's going to be quicker, faster, better, cheaper, all the other things. We almost always end up choosing the rewrite. I have rarely seen anyone choosing an evolution. Let me make this real with a very painful example, right? And again, as I said, first-hand lived experience, so very painful experience, but let's go through that. I think a few years ago, my team inherited a AS400 application. It's not important, and I don't think it's the screenshot of that application as well. It's not important as to what the application was doing, but it's sufficient to understand that this AS400 mainframe application was really core to the business, and it was in service of several large B2B customers. And for all the right reasons, the organization wanted to move away from the AS400 application and move it to a web-based, cloud-native application. And this is roughly how the timelines unraveled in front of our eyes. As I said, the AS400 system was live for several years, actually multiple decades. Some estimate around 2 to 3 decades. And at that point in time, the organization decided, because it's such a legacy tech stack, we need to rewrite. So while the AS400 system continued to serve the users, we started a rewrite initiative, and affectionately called, because we don't usually come up with good names, we started calling it the V1 write, right? So V1 started, we spent about 2 years reaching some sense of a functional parity. This is a complex and complicated industry. It did take 2 years to kind of get to some functional parity. And at which time, we launched to one B2B customer, right? But at the same time, as we were launching it to that one customer, a maturity assessment landed at our desk and said, this application fails to meet any of the modern application standards, full stop. And because of that statement, because of that rather loud and bold statement, the organization got worried and said, I don't know if I can swear here, but we have to start a rewrite. So at that point in time, while that V1 continued to serve that one poor customer, we started a rewrite called V2. And V2 lasted for about, the rewrite of the rewrite lasted for about 1.5 years, at which point in time, we started rolling it out slowly. These are very large B2B customers, so we started rolling them out slowly to other customers. But this is the interesting thing happened around this time. So as we began these rollouts to other customers, we started hearing grumblings from within engineering teams. The engineers started complaining that they were being limited by the initial design and implementation choices which were made. And in some cases, in some of the teams, they were almost making a loud case to start with a third rewrite. They wanted to, or we wanted to start a V3 rewrite. Now, fortunately, we didn't go down this path. We continued investing our time, energy, sweat, love, fear in V2. It took about 4 more years to stabilize the application, but I'm just happy that we continued stabilizing that bit rather than starting a 3rd generation rewrite. I am sharing here with you a very extreme example, but this is a real example. Within the span of about 4 years, we were looking at a rewrite for a rewrite for a rewrite. And there is something about rewrite. I think we are almost conditioned to believe a rewrite is going to be quicker, faster, better, cheaper. I think especially, today when you go to, let's say, React or Angular, just taking some examples, writing a hello world application becomes so much more easier. We are almost conditioned to believe that writing this thing again in a newer technology stack is going to be so much easier. But in reality, in my assumption, or if I were to sum this up, I think a rewrite seems to be our evolutionary fight or flight response. We are conditioned to rewrite because it looks so glittery. It looks so simple. And somewhere, and perhaps, I added the word perhaps there, perhaps a little more controversially, I believe somewhere our ego also has a role to play here. I believe if we examine ourselves deeply, closely, personally, and take some time for reflection, I believe we would assume, or we believe, that we can do a much better job in rewrite than what the previous teams have done, that we can deliver a much better quality software than what the previous teams have done. We somehow believe in rewrites over evolution. We looked at our belief in rewrites. Let's examine something similar, a deep-rooted belief in North Star architecture, visions, and principles. Now, North Star has had an attraction. It's something evolutionary, because for centuries, North Star has been that one guiding force for seafarers and mariners to help them go across the oceans to faraway land. That one standard, one constant source of light in the night sky, which has attracted humankind for many, many years. So in that similar manner, the North Star holds a grip on us. At the beginning of a transformation initiative, I think the engineering teams and the architecture teams are literally spoiled for choices. We spend countless amount of hours spending time determining the right paradigms and principles that we need to adopt. Whether it is a microservices-based architecture, micro front-end, shared nothing, event-driven. I've not even captured every single thing. Perhaps you guys know it much, much more than I do at this moment. But we spend so much amount of time thinking about all these principles and start applying this dogmatically on the transformation program. And I think this dogmatic enforcement of North Star architecture, visions, and principles leads to two main issues. First, have you ever been to an amusement park? I think that's from Legoland. But have you ever been to an amusement park where almost all the rides have a height check gate? You know, poor kids have to prove that they are tall enough to just enjoy the ride, just standing behind the gate. Have you looked at their disappointed faces when they just don't seem to be tall enough to ride the ride? Oh, Mom, I can do that. Dad, I can do that. But, all right. So I think a dogmatic enforcement of North Star architecture principles enforces artificial constraints and arbitrary thresholds on the applications which already exist in the ecosystem. Let me bring this to life with an example. Many, many years ago, again, my team, we inherited a booking engine. This booking engine existed within a complex ecosystem of other applications, right? There were applications which were capturing the customer orders. There were some applications which were managing really complex documentation needs, reporting and tracking, tracing requirements. So this booking engine was at the heart of the ecosystem and was loved. It actually met all the functional criteria, met all the non-functional criteria, and even had almost zero production issues. It was well loved. It was well established in the ecosystem. The only thing which was against this booking engine was, however, it was written on an older technology stack. So it was written on a J2E technologies, nothing wrong with it. I'm not poo-pooing the technology at all. It was written on J2E technologies, was using a JBoss application server, was using Hibernate for persisting data and reading data from and to a relational database. Now, because the North Star architecture vision basically said we have to be cloud native, that meant that this application had to be rewritten. So entirely stable application, which users were happy. It's very rare to find users who are happy with an application. Very, very, very rare, exceptionally rare. But what we ended up doing was we ended up plucking that application just because it did not meet this artificial threshold. Painful, I mean, right? So while the dogmatic enforcement introduces an artificial threshold, I think it also increases the cognitive load on the engineers. Again, let me bring this to life with the same booking engine example. So as we were starting to rewrite, we decided that, oh, because there are so many applications in the ecosystem, we need a common data model. There's nothing wrong, again, with a common data model. It helps applications to talk. It's like schema, right? Like what should your REST APIs or GraphQL and whatever return. So there's nothing wrong with the data model. It basically helps applications within an ecosystem talk effortlessly and effectively to each other efficiently. But what happened, the promise of this new chosen data model was that it could represent all the use cases of a complex and complicated industry. I mean, really complex and really complicated industry, this data model promised that I could represent all the edge cases of this industry. Now, naturally, when you have a data model which can represent all use cases of an industry, the data model itself ends up being complex, complicated, and entirely flexible. So almost all relationships were many-to-many. And herein lies the problem. Because as we were rewriting all the systems in the ecosystem, each engineering team ended up with a different interpretation of the relationship. So many-to-many can be represented as one-to-many, many-to-one, one-to-one. All of these relationships or all of these cardinalities are essentially many-to-many. And herein, because everyone interpreted the data model in their own sweet way, it resulted in an immense amount of integration challenge. It took about a good 3 to 4 months just to get to the bottom of these integration challenges to then have a system which was at least able to talk together in an ecosystem. And it took quite some time to get there. So to wrap this section up, I have nothing against a North Star architecture and principle. Of course, we all live for a better world, right? I mean, our politicians, our leaders, they all create this vision of a better world. A North Star architecture, vision, or principle does the same thing. I have an issue when it is dogmatically enforced on all the engineering teams. You have to do this, otherwise it's not an option. And because of that, all the components of a North Star architecture vision, they're individually exciting. Everyone can get excited about it, but cumulatively, they can end up exhausting a team's, cognitive faculties. That was a pause for effect, but let's keep moving. Third, again, at the start of a transformation initiative, we're almost like kids in a candy shop. We are looking at infinite opportunities and possibilities. There is nothing which can stop us. Maybe mums and dads, purses, wallets, maybe. But there's nothing else which can stop us. We are looking at infinite opportunities and possibilities. And we behave in a similar manner. Because at the start of an initiative, we surround ourselves with variety of different concerns. Whether it's the current requirements, future state requirements, current usage scenarios, future usage scenarios, you name it, we have all the time to think about everything which can happen to this application in years to come. And when we over-index on the future, we often miss what's here and now. Often it comes at the expense of what is here and now. Let me bring this to life with an example and see if it resonates. It's a curious case of a number generator. Well, a relatively recent experience, but one of our teams had a need to generate a unique number which could be associated with a entity being created, so like some kind of a primary key. And what you see are snippets of the code. One gets the current number, the second retrieves the current index from the database and increments it by 1 and returns it. Now, this code was written in TypeScript, was packaged up as AWS Lambda. The database, the backing data store happens to be DynamoDB, right? So was packaged up as an AWS Lambda and deployed. There's nothing fundamentally wrong or right about this, about this code. And it also followed a very typical development life cycle. So from dev, it went to test, it went to performance testing. What was curious is what we did for performance testing. Because in at least 2 or 3 sprint reviews, I'm not talking about sprint, in 2 or 3 sprint reviews or retrospectives, we kept talking about performance testing. I was really curious, like what's happening here? Because the code, yes, everything has to be performance tested, but why are we talking for such an extended period of time on performance testing? And it turned out, the team basically said that we are testing this component for planet scale. And that was really intriguing. Like, why are we testing this component for planet scale? Because it is this component, this number service was at least 2 to 3 months away from taking its first real customer transaction, at least 2 to 3 months away. And it was at least 3 to 5 years away from serving those same customers at full load. So what we are essentially doing is we have taken a concern which is at least 3 to 5 years out there. Who knows if this thing even has to survive? We have fast forwarded, we have made it time travel to today, and have spent all that energy and attention in proving that this component can work if it is deployed 3 to 5 years down the line. We started this talk by talking about reuse. And the same, this component experienced the same issues in the same manner. Let's say a second team, team 2, had a need for a similar service. Now, team 2 was aware of the team 1 work. Team 2 had a few conversations with team 1, had looked at the code, had done, a few their own curiosity checks, let's call it, but then decided they are better off in rewriting that piece of software than evolving it. So this really intrigued me, and when we went back and asked the team, like, why are you not reusing it? There cannot be anything more complicated than, getting a number, incrementing it. Like, why are you not reusing it? We were given 2 explanations. One, we are a Java Kotlin team, and that has been packaged as TypeScript. So we can't, we'll have a learning curve. That was one reason which was offered. And the second reason which was offered was Team 2 felt that they had discovered an edge case in the implementation. And they felt they could do a much better job of eradicating that edge case if they rewrote the software. So our belief, even for something as simple as, get me a number, add, increment it by something and return it back, our belief in rewrite still seems to be stronger. So just to sum this section up, I think oftentimes we find ourselves so intrigued by the problems and challenges of the future. It's like the time travel movies. Like, we are so intrigued by the challenges of the future at the expense of what is here and now. Like, the amount of time we spent performance testing that component, I argue, could have been spent on other vital issues which are vital for our existence, let's say. So when that happens, when we over-index on the future at the expense of the present, we inevitably are slapped by the scope, time, and cost pyramid. Inevitably, we expand the scope, shrink the time, run out of money, and have to scamper towards the end. All right. This one happens to be one of my favorites, ditching first principles, wherein we get afraid of the work we've done. Has any one of us here in this room, if you're brave enough, has any one of you been afraid of the code, the application, the solution which we eventually push to production, which we eventually push to our users? I'll raise my hand because, I don't have it here, but those are scary, scary stories. Maybe that's a material for a different talk. But I think as engineers, we firmly believe in our craft, right? We spend hours, days, years learning, practicing, and perfecting our craft. We firmly believe that using our craft, like using engineering, using development, or developing new solutions and softwares, the business can be future-proof and continue to serve its users for years to come. Now, of course, like any craft, our craft, the craft of developing software, the craft of developing reliable software, is based on few foundational principles. Now, I went around looking for what are these foundational principles, right? And I found this in this book, Kent Beck's excellent extreme programming book. It's like the C book, right? It's like that thin and that condensed with so much of wisdom. And Kent basically highlighted these 5 principles, starting with rapid feedback, simplicity, incremental change. We'll not go through all of them, but our craft, according to this book, which I trust, is based on these few fundamental principles. But what happens is, the moment the going gets tough, it's also these principles which are chucked out of the window right there. At the very first instance, we start throwing that out. Again, let's bring this to life. These are some analytical or pipeline analytics report from a program, let's say. And as you can see, only 50% of the builds which are triggered actually end up passing. And even then, even though we just have 50% of the builds passing, it still takes about 20 to 35 minutes for the build to provide any feedback, right? And I'm not talking about a legacy application where you have to bring up the JBoss application server. I mean, these are relatively simple Spring Boot applications written now. But even then, we have 50% pass rate and a very poor, build response time. And it's no wonder that when such fundamental metrics start suffering, other effectiveness metrics starts dripping or dropping. So from the same repository, and I was looking at it not for a few days, not for a few months, I was looking at it for the entire year. I found out that it takes about 4 days to merge a merge request or a pull request into the main branch. No wonder it's a different view of the same data. While 55% of the merges kind of complete, under a day, but 45% of the merges take more than a day for it to be merged into main line. So once we start throwing our fundamental principles of rapid feedback, it has a cascading impact on how we work. I believe we start all initiatives with the greatest of great intentions. We start with good intentions, but as reality starts hitting us, as reality becomes clear, we always inevitably run into challenges. Those good intentions start turning sour. And by the time we finish, and mind you, if we finish, because several transformation initiatives start dying somewhere in the middle point, by the time we finish and if we finish, we are itching to a restart. We are itching to go back and say, I know I can do a better job, and I need to start again. Interesting thing is, if you combine those 2 graphs together, simply put, if we start ignoring our first principles, rapid feedback, simplicity, all this other good stuff, we are perpetuating ourselves into an infinite cycle of rewrites. And we are just hoping that the next generation of software is somehow magically better than the generation of software we wrote. So ignoring these first principles comes at our own expense. Well, as we come to the 5th dysfunction, it's but natural. I mean, we are all here in London, so we have to talk about the gap. Right? We have to talk about the communication gap very specifically. Now, I think it's safe to assume that user stories have now become the de facto way in which all the variety of different stakeholders talk to each other. Right? Whether it's customers, product owners, business stakeholders, engineers, developers, you name it, we talk via user stories. Well, again, Kent Beck came up with the concept of a user story. Mike Cohn expanded it and gave us that formal definition. Let's examine that in pieces, right? Mike basically said a user story is short. It's a simple description from a user-centric point of view, avoiding any technical details. So rather than talking about, I need to create a table with these 5 columns, nullable, not nullable, and other things, is basically saying what the user will achieve. I think the simplest physical metaphor I have found for a user story in a physical world is either a puzzle set or a Lego block, right? Each tile is a story. As each tile starts falling into place, right, the moment you snap 2 tiles, progress can be validated. It's visible. And finally, if you have enough number of blocks falling into place, you can then see the big picture emerging. But one look at our backlog tools, whether it's ADO, Jira. Actually, how many use Jira? Many, all right. Does anyone use, and this is a curiosity for me, does anyone use the, let's say, the ticket management capabilities of, let's say, GitHub or GitLab? Do you guys simply, all right. So you use that, you don't use Jira at all? Oh, you use Jira as well. All right, that was my curiosity because we were trying to do something very brave, and yeah, we were not ready at that time. All right, so let's go back. So yeah, we were talking about stories, but one look at our backlog management tool, and you can see that we have something which I have started calling as submarine stories. Why? Because at the start of a sprint, one developer, one engineer will leap up, grab a ticket, grab it, dive to the ocean floor, and remain there for at least 3 to 6 months, never to surface again, but only at the end of 3 to 6 months, surface again, take a big gasp, and once you do that, report, I still need more time, and dive back again, and stay there for a variety of time. Have you seen those stories which never fucking end, like, just keeps on going forever, right? And if you're not working on stories of that kind, we are working on stories of dubious value. And this is a real-life example. I don't know if it has the Jira number, but it is a real-life example. As a developer, I want to remove unused code. This is a story, 8 story points. All right, raised by the development team. I don't know, but we work on stories of this kind as well. And when we are not working on stories of the dubious value, we start inventing stories of different types. We start saying it's a front-end story, it's a back-end story, it's a functional story, it's a technical story. We invent stories of all these different classifications. Well, the net result of all of this is we keep pushing the people who really have to care about our work. People like our product owners, our business stakeholders, perhaps even our real customers. Why? A user story is a communication tool. And if we start creating stories of this kind, and I only understand, let's say, this or this, I only understand a specific type of story. I don't know what we are trying to do here. So a user story is a communication tool. And if I cannot relate to the work you're doing, what happens? I'm not interested. So what happens by the choice of our way we articulate our stories, we start fracturing the team. The people who really need to care about our work start saying, no, I don't want to talk to this team. I'll start talking to this sub-team. I'll only talk to the front-end developers, or I'll only talk to these guys because I can at least relate to their work. And it is an anti-pattern for everything which the Agile Manifesto says, which emphasizes collaborations and interactions. So the way we work indeed has a big impact on our stakeholders. And by continuing to push people away from us, by the way, I've just lost my time counter, so I don't know. Something happened on the screen. By continuing to push people away from us, we erode their confidence in our ability to deliver outcomes. So the way we work, the stories we tell, can either build trust or erode trust. So we've covered the 5 dysfunctions. I think finished also 1 glass of water, so the second. We've covered the 5 dysfunctions. So maybe it's also the right time to say, Yes, these are all issues, but how do we break free? Well, it starts with a simple realization. And that realization is, it goes to the very beginning, how we start a program. You see, at the beginning of a transformation initiatives, as engineers, as engineering teams, we take an enormous amount of pressure and stress on ourselves to promise to the business to say, you are never going to be constrained again. What we are going to build, it doesn't matter what we are building, but what we are going to build is going to be future-proof, bomb-proof for all your needs. Your customers, your business, you will never be constrained again. And if you don't believe me, go and look at any design documents, right? And talk about modularity, layerability. We promise the world. But everything about a business is constantly changing. The market conditions, tariffs just hit, right? No one knows what to do about it. The business strategy, competitors, the needs of a business. In fact, internal priorities and budgets keep on changing. Nothing about the business is static. And if that's the condition, why should we spend so much amount of time thinking about what it could be, right? Why should we spend so much amount of time in predicting? We don't know it for sure. We are just predicting and building what may be ahead of us. So, again, I like physical metaphors, and I like to think about us, during those initial days, as perfectionists, like these elite runners, like Eliud Kipchoge. And do you know when this picture was taken? When Eliud broke his 2-hour marathon mark, right? So he ran a full marathon. Of course, it was not recognized as a marathon in 1 hour, 59 minutes, something. He broke it. But we look at ourselves as these elite athletes in the pursuit of perfection. Business cannot be constrained again. Whereas I think we need to be looking at it as an endurance event and just be happy and if we are completing it. So in my view, we increase the chances of success if we simply move away from a pursuit of perfection to a pursuit of completion, rather than thinking about every single thing. Now, I don't have the time, but I think I've practiced this enough so that we will get you out there on time. I think, in my view, there are 3 practical practices which we can all follow to move us from the pursuit of perfection to a pursuit of completion. And in my views, that's solving for the present, slicing to build trust, and safeguarding evolution. So let's start from the first, solving for the present, right? The solving for the present is as simple as it can be. It's about doing what needs to be done now. It's about doing and completing the stories, completing the task, what needs to be done now without overthinking, without rumination. It's about bringing a little bit of mindfulness today to the work we are doing. So a cheesy example, if you are asked to write if the need of the business requirement is to add 2 numbers, let's just write a function which can add those 2 numbers, instead of going ahead and designing a scientific calculator, which can also add 2 numbers. So that's what I call pursuit of completion. Second, slicing to build trust. Well, I believe that all organizations and all transformation initiatives do run into headaches and problems and real-life challenges. There is not even a single initiative I know of which doesn't have a huge backlog of issues to deal with. And the only way we can overcome those challenges is by ensuring that we have built deep-rooted trust and relationship with our stakeholders. And I have found no better way to do that other than showing, the puzzle appears, other than showing that we can show the work in small, continuous, and incremental chunks. When we show work in small, continuous, and incremental chunks, our stakeholders become vocal promoters of us rather than vocal detractors. When we show work in those small, continuous, and incremental chunks, they will support us no matter where we have to go and present the sorry state of the transformation initiatives, because these initiatives are hard. So I don't know how many of you have heard about the user story mapping techniques, but this is one example where, as engineers, we can spend a little bit of time investing. Because a user story mapping technique, it's by the guy Jeff Patton. There are some brilliant YouTube videos out there. Allows us to break complex functional pieces into smaller, understandable, recognizable stories and facilitates communication. It's a brilliant communication tool, so I would just implore that you spend a little bit of time exploring that. Now, it might suggest that I'm trying to suggest that we do throwaway work. Don't think about the future. Throwaway work, do this, do that. This is more important. Get today done. Well, no, because the third practice of safeguarding evolution is basically acts as a counterbalance. Very simply put, what it means is, let us ensure that the cost of evolution is not too high. There will always be time. So let's say if you're using an RDBMS and you want to go to a document data store, there will always be some time and effort needed. But let's safeguard the cost of evolution so that it's not a big mountain, rather a very small hill which has to be climbed. Now, there are many, many, many techniques out there. In fact, the Extreme Programming book talks about a lot of things. It's only devoted. It calls itself Extreme Programming, but it's devoted to how do you make the cost of evolution low. And one of the best techniques that I have seen is investing in a solid test pyramid. I know Trisha was talking about unit tests just a few minutes ago, or the previous talk there. So investing in a solid test pyramid is one way of going about it. So getting us back to where we started, right? Yes, the chances of, we were looking at some really bad statistics. 1 out of 4 initiatives succeed. So I am hoping that if we follow these 3 practices empowers us to start overcoming these 5 dysfunctions and hopefully start having some success. Thank you. We can take some questions if you have it. Thank you.
Mitigated or avoided if the business were working very closely with engineering leadership?
Yeah, so the question is, should engineering leaders be allowed to make business decisions? I think it's like a partnership. So I think I would say if one voice starts winning, we end up in a dictatorship. So I think there has to be some good trust between, these functions. Each serves a different function. So I do think there needs to be a bit of partnership so that each of these voices are heard. Yeah. Yeah, I wouldn't say one voice wins.
I guess I almost wonder if it's something like operations or project managers manage the process of asking engineering leadership for their input on what are the tasks. They go away and
yeah.
people have their own different expertises, right?
Yeah. I think engineering should have a seat on the table, and that's what we have started seeing a lot of organizations, like bringing development in-house and other things. So I'm sure they're building those muscles, and absolutely, there has to be more collaboration. All right. Any other questions? We're probably going to almost run out of time. Cool then. Thank you all for coming here, and enjoy the rest of your day. And yeah, talk to you soon. Ciao.